Thanks for having me. It's actually my first time here in Poland and obviously at Digital Dragons, and I really liked it so far. Today, I want to talk to you about community-driven development and how Ubisoft Blue Byte reinvented itself for the development of Anno 1800, our latest strategy title. Very briefly and shortly about my position. So I'm a community developer, which is a little bit different to your classic community manager. Very shortly, I'm sitting in the actual production team in the development studio, and my role is primarily to create channels, to actually gather feedback from our community, but also to ensure that that feedback is implemented into our production pipeline. So this talk will have different topics, a little bit about community, a little bit about game production and how we reinvented ourselves, so how we got new ideas and how we actually managed to be very successful about that. And to just dive right into it. So the thing about development and the so-called development bubble and how we actually work with community feedback is usually very reactive. So in most cases, we get feedback when the game is out, or maybe I have an early access approach. So my game is sold on Steam early, so I get a feedback channel, and then I work with that because people say like, okay, current state of the game is it's released, people don't like that, so we need to act. We need to have a patch update, we need to change our strategy, etc. And we thought about the idea, okay, how can we use that feedback early, very proactive, preventative, before we reach a state where the game might be in a situation where we have to have a big turnaround, like a situation where it's like, okay, people don't like our game, so we need to change. So how can we work with that feedback to prevent that situation? And before we dive into the details how we actually did it, I want to talk with you about some general understandings of how community works and community dynamics. That will be very brief because you can have your own talk just about that matter. Short question, who of you guys works in community or works with communities? Okay, it's good. So maybe, or hopefully, there will be a takeaway for you for getting an idea how modern communities behave, because we had some learnings about that and realized, okay, maybe our old school approach is not exactly working anymore nowadays. And then we show on the example of Anno 1800 how we actually changed our whole strategy from pre-alpha on. So very, very early in development. And at the end, I will show you how to implement feedback into the production pipeline, how to create a one-page community report your creative director, your game designer, etc. understands. And we'll have a lot of examples, how we actually used that, and what we learned of the period of the development of the game since we announced it 2017. So let's start with some basic community stuff. I think every one of us has some idea about communities. Most likely, the word community means is like people who play our game, right? Or people who play video games. But there are a lot of differences and nuances. And the first thing when it comes to community feedback is you have to understand where's the feedback coming from, what are the people actually saying, who they are we actually talking about the community, or is it maybe an audience? Is everyone who plays our game actually a member of our community? And the first thing, because it's usually something we take as a given, right? Gaming communities, people who play games, there are certain rules to it. What defines an actual gaming online community, right? So usually they need to have like a common interest. Of course, video games, they need a place, let's say Reddit or a subreddit. They have a set of rules, can be various things, can be nice to each other, or we talk about this game, or we try to come up with new ideas for the modding community. But it can be something very, very general, like, okay, this is a mature community, we want to be constructive, we don't want to encourage toxicity, various things. But very important is that you have actually interaction between members, and that is the first thing when it comes to community, where we have often misconceptions. Is everyone who talks to us on Twitter a member of a community? Does anyone who engages with us on Twitter or Facebook or whatever actually wants to talk to other fans as well? Maybe there's a difference between someone who says, actually I don't like your game, and someone who wants to start a discussion. I go that far to say that actually to be part of a community means you want to discuss, you want to interact, you want to change your opinions with other people. But more often the so-called social media engagement, etc., when we get reports and what are people saying, it's just like, okay, they just want to share their one opinion, they have no interest in engaging, there's no constructive consensus out of this discussion. So it's very, very important for us. And the sense of belonging. That is something you will find, how is your Reddit community, how is your forum community, do they behave completely different? Maybe they have even like some pride in being part of a fan site as an example. But there's one important thing. As you can see here, we have many different places. Discord is an absolutely kick-ass and great place to be nowadays. You have either a very constructive and nice Reddit community or a toxic mess. Depends if you're lucky or not. But they're all very different. Best example, go to IGN, go to the comment section. Is someone who rants about your game on IGN a valuable member of your community? Is that important? Is that different? Bottom line, every one of them is a different community. And so one takeaway, which will be important for the reporting part later on, we have communities, plural. So if you try one thing, in future when you talk about community with your colleagues, with your friends, or during a meeting, try to get that idea of plural communities in your head. Don't put them all in one bucket because they're all different. But more about that a little bit later. So the next thing, I dove into that in the beginning, is everyone actually part of our community? And we said, okay, wait a minute. Maybe not. Maybe not everyone who buys our game, plays our game, and maybe leaves one comment on our Facebook wall is a member of a community. There's a difference between community and audience. And still, both matters. Like, it's still important to gather feedback from your audience. But bottom line is, for most games, the audience, these are the people buying your game. That brings in money. You hear often the thing about communities where you say like, okay, there's a very, very small but very vocal group. Yes, because often the people being very loud in your forum, sharing their feedback and demanding something, are actually only a very, very small part of your player base. In your community team or even your production team, you're in the situations like, okay, how do we value that? Because sometimes we cannot change everything just because that vocal minority wants to change it. Because you might create a scenario where you create a game which is super great for hardcore players, but no one buys it. Because you have maybe the couple of thousand, depending on the size of your game, people who love that hardcore game are super happy with it, but at the end you don't generate sales because you were not able to attract more casual people. And there's an important distinction. And you have different brands. Even at Ubisoft we have different brands. As an example, Anno 1800, we have this community core, which are people who not only play our game, but also interact with us. They interact with others on fan sites, they talk to us. This core is very big on Anno. Anno is a hardcore game, the series is 21 years old. We have a lot of different fan communities, and this core is very big. We have audience, of course, but the inner core here takes a big part. While you might have, as an example, a big AAA franchise which has millions of sales, but the core of your community might be way, way smaller. Because actually there are not that many people interested in having a fan site and collaborating with other fans, but just buying the game every year, every 2 years, and just enjoying their time and then go on to the next game. So that is something, figure out that for yourself, for your game. What kind of game are you? Do you have maybe like created a game in the past where you can bring community together to your new game? What is your demographic? Because that community is still super important as much as the audience, because it influences the audience. If you Google any game nowadays, tips and tricks, opinions, whatever, on the first Google page you will stumble over Reddit threads. You will stumble over Steam reviews. You will stumble over user-generated content. And video gamers out there, when they want to know something about their game, they usually not go to press first. They usually absolutely not go to the developer first. They check what other people have to say, so they generate that content. And for that reason, and that influence on the audience, and that the community can transform audience to community members, like Discord is actually a great place to be because it's super easy to get people into and transform them, is why community is important. But we use both. We use feedback from audience and community, but especially the community for Anno 1800 was super important for us. So that was a general community part. Now let's understand where we are. Who of you guys know Anno 1800 or the Anno series in general? Perfect. So I can keep that sweet and short. So the Anno series is 21 years old. It's the 7th game of the series, the main title, Anno 1800, we just released. And we have quite some history with our fans. So Anno fans are very special. I mean, of course, everyone says this about their game, like every gaming community is special, but some of these guys follow us for 21 years now, and they have a very strong opinion. Anno is a niche game, in a sense of it is a city building, strategy, economy simulation, etc. game. It's not your classic action title. And people have expectations. And to be honest, beside the fact that they sink hundreds of hours, that they're emotionally connected to the series, etc., they're very skeptical. We are very strong in Europe, and we are very strong in Germany, and Germans are in general like very skeptical about everything. So very, very strong in Europe, very opinionated, and we have some other things which were very interesting for us, like our community is was very insulated. So we had partially fan sites, 20 years old, who had struggles and fights with other fan sites who were also like 10 years old, and no one wanted to work together. Everyone was his own island, so to speak, which is funny in the sense of Anno. But we realized there's no real collaboration, there's no team spirit, there is no place where the community goes. It says like, yes, we are all Anno fans. Anno fans were usually like, okay, this is my platform, I'm part of this fan community, I don't like the other ones, and this is very toxic and generated a lot of toxicity. And it was something where we said like, okay, maybe we want to try to fight that. So this is an Anno fan in a nutshell, so to speak. Also some background, you might know 2205 as an example. We tried a few things differently, right? It was not only a sci-fi title, 2070 was also a sci-fi title, but the last one, we streamlined many mechanics, we changed some mechanics, and the old school Anno fans, which are usually your active vocal part of your community, were not so happy about this. And you know, the series is 21 years old, and you do one game, the 6th game of the series, which was not as successful or not as our core fans wished it should have turned out. And one game, and everyone is a doomsayer. After 2205, every one of the hardcore fans was like, oh, I'm not sure if they can still do it, like maybe it's the end of the Anno series, right? 6 games, one game in the series, and it's enough that your community turns on you, so to speak. So that's important to know, because when we went in, we said, okay, we need to reconsider things, we need to understand our community, and we want to change that. We want to change the way they see us. We want to develop a game outside of the development bubble. We want to create a game which is absolutely great for hardcore fans, but as well as the audience. But before that, we need to understand how our players tick. And here's the first real strategic part. If you work on your game, if you try to understand your community, try to break it down on as small bits as possible. So we said as an example, like, what do Anno players actually like about Anno? Obviously, it's a city builder. And the emotion about that is they love building giant cities. Makes sense. It's complex strategy, which means for them replayability. An Anno fan expects that if I cannot sink 300, 400, 500 hours into a game, it's a failure. This is something important to understand, right? And player freedom. That sense of like creating beauty, the vision behind that, building giant cities, landscapes, etc. It's very important. And one tip for you guys, if you work on a smaller project or depending how your community strategy looks like, try to break your game down to 3 points. And then if it's a community plan or a development plan, doesn't matter. Follow that 3 points. Ignore, if you don't have the free resources to just try things out, ignore everything else. Just stick to it with every kind of like content you do in your forum, on a blog, on YouTube, on social media. Always ask yourself, is one of the things I do, will that lead back to one of the 3 points here? And that will greatly help you to create a strategy to follow that and to raise the quality of your content. The question why should be always in the room. And if you can easily answer that with, okay, Anno Games, we're doing that kind of like content because it's a city builder and they love building giant cities. So we're doing a contest or some social media coverage or live stream where we show how great the big cities look like. You can break it down to small or big pieces. So after we realized that, how our players are and what they love about our game, we thought about a strategy. And a few things about strategy which also makes it way, way easier for you is align that with your brand marketing team, with your creative direction, have that aligned. If you bring everyone on board, if your strategy in these 3 points is something where your brand team, as an example, or marketing team, or your creative director, depending on the size of your project, agrees on, it makes everything way, way easier. And it will help you to push through feedback. More about that a little bit later. Clear goals help to validate actions, yada, yada. We have a lot of soft data. We're talking about community. So when I say like, okay, we want to grow our community, what does it actually mean? Set yourself yearly goals. Say like, okay, we want to reach this, this, and that. We usually do 3. We take 3 goals, and we'll talk about the goals in a second. That helps you because after a year you can tell, even with a community team, which is usually hard to measure in data, we were successful because we matched target A because of reason X, or maybe we missed mark B, and next year we're doing it better. Yeah. So, and here are our 3 goals. That is what we wanted to achieve with Anno 1800. So we said we need to regain trust. I talked about 2205. People were like doomsaying us and saying, okay, you cannot do it anymore. The Anno series is dead because of that one game. We said like, okay, you know what? We regain trust. Now our idea was community-focused development. We announced the game as early as in pre-alpha, 2 years before the release of the game. And not only that, we will from that day on share development insights, bring you on board. We'll gather your feedback and develop the game together with our community 2 years in advance for a AAA title, without selling the game in early access, etc. This was no option for us. So, and we will have transparent communication to, obviously, we put the cards on the table to bring everyone on board, right? Second goal, this isolated, toxic communities, we bring them together via a community hub. We create a website where fans can be fans, where just everyone can leave a comment without feeling harassed or whatever, where it's super easy for everyone to just be a fan, a part of this fandom, and share their feedback. And obviously we want to grow, right? A 21-year-old series, it would be bad if we just cater our community. We want to have a bigger audience. We want to transform them. We need new players, new fans. No series can survive if you just like cater the same players over and over and over again. And we do that with live stream, media actions, trying to be modern, try to test new things out. And sometimes, especially for a bigger studio, it's harder to do that than for a smaller studio. Like to change, to try new things out with when you have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of experience is sometimes in your way. So for that, you can check that out on your own. We created the Anno Union. The Anno Union is our central community hub, which means from 2017 on, we shared weekly dev blogs where we said like, okay, this is what we're currently working on. This is the vision of our game. This is what we plan to do. This is an in-progress version of the game. Here's some screenshots, videos. And now, what do you think? Share your feedback to that specific point, which made it incredibly easy for us to keep the steering wheel in our hand because we provided the content strategy. We knew exactly what we want to talk about, but at the same time, being very transparent about the state of the game, and then actually worked with that feedback we got from the community. And there's a lot of like fanfare also. We had community spotlight, all that community building stuff, and we decided to have just a classic blog comment function to make it as easy as Reddit to comment, because we realized forums, while we're not disbanding forums, have one problem. Let's say I'm a new fan, I go to a forum, right? I just want to leave my opinion. I check the different threads and try to find the right one. Maybe I'm not finding the right one. I create a new thread, type something, and the first comment I get is, have you used the search function? Dude, we had already a comment like this. And then like also your opinion, sorry, I'm in this community since 2009 and maybe you should get in touch with the other people first because I'm not sure if the stuff you're saying, your complaints about the game or your wishes or whatever are valid. For a lot of young people, a forum has so many gating processes where you have the feeling you have to open so many doors to just leave your comment. And that's not how they used to operate. On Reddit, I just go there, leave my comment, whatever. Someone can vote it up or not. On Twitter, I just leave my opinion. But a forum is a very old school thing. We realized we want to make it as easy as possible for everyone to just leave their opinion because we wanted to get that opinion, right? We don't want to encourage fights between members about opinions. So yeah, check it out, it's announion.com. There's a ton of stuff on that website. Some stuff worked incredibly well for us, some not. The great thing is it was an experience, it was an experiment also for us. We just tried it out, it's like, okay, let's do it and see how it goes. It went well, but it was also, okay, we realized this content maybe is not working, or there we need more feedback from the players. And in that case, we not only shared a lot of development insights, we also invited the most active players. We generated a lot of new fans. We have now a Discord server which has like 1,500 members. And bear with me, we are not, let's say, Division or Assassin's Creed. Anno is not a small franchise, but we are still a niche genre. So when we're talking about that 1,500 people on Discord, this means a lot to us, even like we were surprised how big. So we created a lot of new fan sites, created a lot of new relations to our fans. So we're incredibly proud of that. And the best is we also invited them to test the game early, 2 years ago. So that was our pool of players to test the game even without selling it, because early access was not an option for us. And when we needed more feedback to a certain topic, we just invited them to a studio NDA, or they could play it online under NDA and just test the game. Or usually over 2 weeks and providing daily reports, getting full dev support from us. And that worked really well. So here in some numbers before we go to the production part. So since we launched at Gamescom 2017, we wrote 135 blogs in 2 languages, so it's 170. That is a lot. Especially some blogs of that have an average of 1,000 words. So obviously, if you have that approach, you need someone who actually writes that kind of stuff, right? And you need to get an idea with your strategy, how big is your team, does it make sense for you, what can you to what can you commit. We had 16,000 feedback comments. One short thing about that is, with feedback comments, if I tell you, okay, we had like 16,000 comments on Reddit or in our forum, it's like, oh yeah, sounds okay, it's a lot, but fair enough. This is all feedback. Because there's 16,000 comments of a website where we said, okay, this is feature XY, what do you think about it? And then every single one commenting shared his opinion about that feedback. And we usually had call to actions where I even sit down with the development teams, what do you want to know? Give me your question, I will ask our players. So 16,000 comments of valuable feedback we could actually use for the development of the game. Over 30,000 votes for content, which means we even let them decide, okay, like we have space for one more NPC in the game. Which one do you like? They could create their own ship design, and they could create their own island. Keep in mind, with Anno, an island is basically a level. All islands are handcrafted, are very important for the Anno player, the whole design set, and they could design an island, and this was, the winner was at the end actually implemented into the game. And yeah, and maybe the most important part, they actually liked it. So we had, even when we had like a few blocks, because yes, from that 135, we had a few where we got negative feedback, but if you break it down, it was below 1%. So constant positive feedback. And when we started that, people, I wouldn't go that far, hated us. We still had a lot of fans, obviously, but people were very distant, like, oh, I'm not sure if we can trust you, and it's just a marketing gag, and let's see, and you have to deliver before we trust you, yeah, etc., etc. Constant positive feedback from that kind of like crossed arm communities, like, I'm not sure. The question is, I talked a lot about like how communities behave and how they how we managed to get a lot of feedback and ideas, how we got new ideas, how communities work, and how we created a channel and a strategy to get all that feedback. The question is, what we do with that? And now we come to the last part, because we come to the part where almost every single company I worked for creates a community report. It's called community sentiment. You have usually, it consists of sometimes several pages, positive, neutral, negative, some numbers, engagement on social media, and a verdict. Maybe like, okay, like currently the community likes us, or they don't like the latest patch, etc. Fair enough, we still create these reports because they're useful. But if I give such a community report to my executive producer, to my producer, creative director, game designer, and say, do you have like 30 minutes to read through that kind of like stuff, and can we then change something? It's usually saying like, first, no, I don't have the 30 minutes. Second, okay, it seems like they don't like us because of reason X. Let's maybe look into it, but that's it. It's not useful. It's really hard to put into actions. And we wanted to change the way we provide community reports and make that feedback usable. I have too many times experienced that community teams, as an example, provide feedback. The team, even like open and honestly, likes that feedback. It's like, okay, thank you, that's interesting, but how are we going to proceed with that? Like, what is then the next step, other than maybe some emergency meetings? Maybe you should change the balancing of X. And often, there are several problems when using feedbacks. First, work together. Your community team is in most companies either marketing or customer support or in between. It's really, really hard for community guys to get even through to talk to developers many times. How can we help the development team, as an example, to use feedback if the only interaction is a report which comes Friday afternoon? We need meetings, we need to sit together. Who of you sat together, if not like most likely in a small company, but in a bigger company as a community guy, and we're sitting for an hour in a room with a creative director, able to talk about the stuff going on, or with the lead game designer? That happens rarely. But we can also do something. When you want to have that approach of actually being transparent as early as possible, have a good plan. Start with sitting together with your producer, as an example, go through the development roadmap and ask them, when is the point about feature X when we want to talk about it? It's like, okay, feature X reaches alpha state at milestone 11, as an example, or milestone 5 or whatever. Is that the point you want to talk about it, or earlier? Oh, you would love to get a little bit feedback earlier. Okay, let's do it in April. Create building blocks. We actually created the whole yearly plan. And we went that far that we sat together with creative direction. Everyone's like, what is the priority? What do you think? What's the most important features to structure everything? And that helps them to understand your actual work, because most people who are not community managers, if you ask them what's your job, they will answer, talk to the players, right? I've rarely had a situation where someone not working in community was actually able to explain my job or what my actual role is. And the same, if you have that, sit together, again, a table, try to get the development team on board. And that might not be that easy for everyone, because you need the commitment from your company, from other stakeholders, from your production team, etc. And I'm in the really lucky position. I'm sitting in the production team. I just can turn around and say like, hey, executive producer Burkhard, we need to talk about that thing X. Can you schedule a meeting with our lead game designer? Because it's important that we talk about that for the next patch update. That, I'm lucky. That's not easy. Try to convince people in your company, try to win people over, try to establish connection. And that also means be as early as possible, learn to pitch your ideas in a proper way, learn a little bit maybe about game production and how that actually works when you work mainly in community. That will help you to get allies. Next thing about reporting is, I talked about that soft data part, right? Soft data has one problem. What do you do with that? If you calculate a couple of thousand comments where people say, and we actually did that, where people say, I like that, or I don't like that, this is not telemetry data where a business developer or whatever can tell you. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Community is about trends, it's about opinions, it's not hard data. Maybe if you have, like, let's say, a monetization model which you change and then all of a sudden people drop spending less money because of something. But get as much data as possible, get it from many different places. Get that from your forum, get that from your blog, go to IGN, check, and then see that you structure it by core community and by audience. I'll show you that in a second. And then, yes, sometimes, because most community tools are not great with that, yes, you have tools which are able to give you a trend, right? It's like so many percentage positive comments, and then if you go in there and check it by yourself, you realize, this guy said, fuck, this game is awesome, and it's marked as negative because it said fuck. Like, often software has a hard time without like a human person checking through that kind of stuff, right? And also important for the community development approach. As much opinions as you get, as loud as the players yell, change that. Stay true to your game. That is one incredibly important thing. No matter what you change, you have your core vision. Your development team has an idea what the game is all about, what's the core DNA of your game. Don't change that just because players yell about it. And I will give you an example in a second, which is going to be interesting, because just providing positive examples where everything went fine would be boring. We have some interesting insights for you, where we still, with that open, transparent approach, decided against just following the loudest voice in the community. And that is someone for you guys who work in community, everyone's familiar with that, which is incredibly hard sometimes. So, let's talk about military and land combat. Land combat was in previous Anno games. And the problem was, it is incredibly hard for us to make a proper, feasible combat, land combat scenario. We are a city building game. The place where units fight is usually the game world where you construct. There are many different reasons why it's a very expensive, so to speak, feature to develop. It takes a lot of time as a core feature, a lot of development resources. And we communicated early, very, very early, that the game won't have land combat, even though it had it in the past. Land combat in the past was either very simple, like very stone, paper, scissor, RTS combat, or a very weird mixture of building camps and slowly progressing towards in a battle which usually takes, I'm not kidding, a whole evening, 6, 7, 8 hours to conquer one island. We decided, you know what, if we skip land combat, that allows us to create so many more great features, quality features, so we decided against it. The community was not happy about it, because without land combat there is no Anno. I need my land combat, even though we knew from telemetry data in the past that people rarely use that feature. This is kind of like everyone wants it, but no one plays it. So we announced it early, and we crunched some data, and we realized, okay, our community, 80% of them said, if you don't have land combat, the game is dead to me. I don't want it anymore. It's over and done. While we checked the audience, and realized, okay, like, yes, we had still strong opinions. We're talking about Facebook, Twitter, whatever, IGN comments. Funny enough, you would think that your own community is a little bit more nice. But no, people were kind of like, way more people were like, I don't care, or whatever. Land comment was always bad, so better you cut that stuff. So that was first interesting for us, to realize actually the audience gives us way more room to work with that than our actual community. And we said, like, okay, Anno Union, we announced it as early as possible. And we used that feedback to create a report and sit together with the whole community, with the whole development team, and see, is it feasible? Can we do something? Should we do something? And what you see here is a lot of stuff. But that is a 10, 12, 13-page community report on one single page. And I promise you, if you create a report like this, you start with, okay, community, audience, change both elements, try to get some numbers into that, try to reduce it on 3 points. Is there an alignment? Is there controversy? Maybe there's a situation that your community loves it and the audience hates it, or whatever. Are there some learning insights? Does it fit with the brand promise and with our creative vision? Again, complex gameplay, that is what players want, and they feel that because we skip or cut land combat, we don't offer a complex experience, challenge and action items. So this then discussed with your production team as an example, with your creative director, etc. And I promise you, you can show that report in 5 minutes to even maybe a CEO of your company, someone who works high up in marketing ranks or wherever, who has no idea about community management, or maybe not even like an idea about that specific brand, about your game, whatever. They will understand. That is the important thing. Don't create a report for community managers. Create a report for developers. That is something you can pitch in an elevator. You can say like, okay, look, I have some numbers, here's the learnings, insights, are we going to do something about it? So we checked that one and realized, okay, we took something out without explaining why it's beneficial. We said there is no land combat, but we did, in our opinion, not the best job in explaining why it's actually good for the game. The result of that, we need to provide better information and more details about that matter, and re-evaluate feature, feasibility, and potential drawback. Spoiler, we decided against it, because for us in that situation it was not feasible. So we communicated early, said, no, we're not going to do it, and then obviously had to deal with the backlash, right? It obviously took some time. We did some iterations, worked on some prototypes, but here's some interesting development. To the left, you see the Art of War, which was our blog where we announced it. To the right, you see the announcement that we won't have land combat, that we thought about it and we still decided against it. There's a community. So you see, we went from left to the right just with open and transparent communication. Still rough. It's way better now, by the way. It's rarely complain about that matter, but in the audience, the shift was even stronger. The majority of people out there said, you know what, okay, I get this. Maybe I'm sad, like the yellow part, I'm sad, but I'm okay with that. So, as it turns out, being open and transparent works. It is not easy, it's sometimes scary, but we did it nonetheless, and we would do it again. Last thing, because I think I have to speed up a little bit, how you take that feedback. That is more for the people who actually work in game production. If you have that feedback and that idea, integrate it into your actual development roadmap. If you go to your classic Confluence page where there's a sprint milestones, where it says feature X, Y, Z, etc., make a category, that is what we did, for that feedback. It's like, okay, currently the New World session is in alpha state, player stories means that is the feedback we gathered from our community, that is what our players want, and in the current state, alpha, are we meeting community expectations or not? We can say that to every single feature in our development roadmap. We could say, what do players want, and are we meeting the player expectations or not, and when not, what is missing? Few quick examples. We did a lot. We changed the New World session, South America, basically surely on community feedback. We threw everything out of the window and changed that based on community feedback. We did so much balancing, completely feature new evaluations just based on feedback over the course of 2 years. There's a lot of that on the Anno Union. You can happily talk to me about that if you want to have more details on that matter. As I said, even with military and ground units, constant positive sentiment. And as you might have heard, Anno 1800 is a big success. And we are all convinced it is a success because of the Anno Union and the way we approached development. Not only for marketing, but also to push the quality of the game. And if you want to keep in touch with us, we have our own booth here, Digital Dragons, first floor, Ubisoft Blue Byte. If you want to check job positions, if you want to talk with us about that matter, about different things, just come over and say hello. I'm not sure, do we have like time for one more or two questions, or?
Yeah, we have like 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, it was an awesome speech. Thank you very much. My question is, how do you approach copyrights? So, for example, you have an open approach for, let's develop the game, let's have your influence on the game. How do you approach, like say, new ideas that players bring to the game, and how do you approach these ideas from the copyright side?
Be careful with that. So yeah, the thing is, often people say like, oh, I had this idea, and when you turn around and say like, this is an awesome idea, we're going to do that, then they can theoretically turn around and one day and say like, oh, by the way, you copied my idea. Oh, by the way, I work in game design, etc., and where's my money? Or you can have, depending on where you are, problems with that. We never say specifically, this idea came from person X. We always talk about the community, plural. We always say,
I saw it in your presentations, players and stuff like this. So
never ever say this. The only exception where we did this was with the contest, where a player actually designed an island, and we said, and then we checked it back with our legal team. But no matter what people say, you can say nice feedback in a forum, as an example. When someone makes a great post, I pass it on to the development team, or we discuss this internally, but we won't go back and say, like, we changed it because of player X. We will always say we changed certain things because of feedback in the community, and never name someone because of the copyright thing.
okay, thanks.
Hey, thank you for a fantastic presentation. I'd like to ask, we have such problem, we have quite big community in our game, and our issue is part of it is on Discord, part of it is on Steam, part of it is on a forum, let's say, and you mentioned that basically it's even better to move to Reddit or something. How do you deal with it?
So first thing is we're in a lucky position that our Reddit community is actually more positive than our forum community. Usually Reddit is different. We actually, I mean, we're in the lucky position. We obviously Ubisoft. We have a whole I have a whole community team who can check various places, right? The good thing with the Discord is we don't have an official Discord which is managed by us. We said, you know what? If you want to create a fan site and the Discord is a fan site, do it on your own community. We just keep a very close relationship to the admins of that Discord. And sometimes we have even talks, like as an example, I invite people frequently to a roundtable on Discord where it's like a Reddit AMA where everyone in the community can ask me questions for 2 hours on an evening and I answer everything. Or I sit together with the Facebook admin of our fan group and say like, hey, what's currently going on in your community? Oh, it's interesting. Do you have some links for me, etc.? So you make them your allies, especially if you have a good relationship to the admins of certain fan sites, subreddits. Reddit is super important to have a good relationship to them. Ask them to help you out because they happily usually do. They know sometimes their community even a little bit better than you do. And then obviously, we break it down. We have, when we start gathering data and doing number crunching, we say, okay, this is a forum, this is Anno Union, this is our main core community. Then we have the second tier, Reddit, Discord, etc., and Steam. Because there's usually only talking about your game. Then we have usually the third tier, it's like IGN comics comment section about your game. Because usually it's like not a dedicated page which is only talking about your game. It's more like an article where people talk about your game. That's usually audience. So we split it up and then go through that feedback and then we say, okay, we pick 20 comments from the Anno Union, 100 comments from the Union, 100 comments there, 20 there. So we take a part of that and then crunch it, narrow it down to positive, negative, not positive, etc. So you have to go through the numbers.
So you don't even try to centralize your forum, like saying Steam players, please come on our... Okay, cool.
We offer the Anno Union, like the ideas, we are not forcing players. So Anno Union was like, everyone can get all the information they want in the Anno Union. We will highlight fans. We even say on the Anno Union, hey, we have this great Discord. We say on our official site, hey, have you checked the Facebook fan group? Have you checked this place? So we even feature them. We help them grow, and they're very thankful about that. So they're coming back to us. We just provide with the Anno Union all the information players want, and we're happy when they create different fan sites. But of course, for us, main priority is, as an example, Reddit is super important for us. You will find sections in the internet where you say like, okay, there are just not too many players for us, etc. Identify who's the most biggest and important, and then establish a relationship.
Thank you.
Right, we have one more question, maybe. All right, far away from here.
Hey, I get a bit confused about at the part where you ask about military units. What the general question is, Do you think there is some psychology with questioning the community? Like, do you prefer A or do you prefer B? Do you like, instead of asking, what do you think about getting rid of military units, to ask, do you like more military units or do you prefer more buildings? Like, not to ask them if they want something or not, what do they prefer?
So
Psychology.
Okay, yeah, I get you. So it's all about how you phrase your questions. When it comes to the how complicated thing of human psychology, usually players want everything and don't want to give up anything. Because usually if you say like, we could reduce that and give you that instead, then players say like, no, we want everything. I'm not happy with that. It's really hard. So what we usually do is the question is like, we have open questions. With the military topic as an example, we just presented a whole game design document, if you so will, not easy digestible for players. This is how the military will be, and explain why we won't have land combat. And then, what's your opinion? And then you get opinion. But when there's a matter where you want to have like more accurate feedback, or you want to have an A/B, do you like this or this one more? You can ask that, but be careful with stuff like this, where you know that will create controversy. Then additionally, we invited players to play tests and to discussions. We invited them to the studio, sit together on one table, and talk through the military topic. Under NDA, it's like, okay, what do you exactly want? What was the part of previous Anno games which you liked about land combat? What would you love to see come back? But this is something we did not do publicly, but we invited very, very constructive members from the community to the studio to talk about that, together with us on one table. Even there, we made sure that we get a good mixture. Now, not only yay-sayers, or we did not just like invited people who were like, hated military combat anyway. We strictly invited some people where we knew they want land combat and they have a strong opinion on that. Get this versatile feedback going on. But be careful in giving them an A/B scenario. We see this with votes. Votes can backfire quickly because with votes you have the feeling everyone who chooses A and at the end A wins a result will be happy. But everyone who chooses B feels like a winner, a loser, right? That is a problem. You create a winner-loser scenario with A/B scenarios. Because everyone who feels at the end is like, okay, I voted for something, but they did not choose it, feels like, oh, what a letdown. So there's a lot of like psychologies and tricks how you can phrase questions and stuff like this. But it's a complicated matter, absolutely, because players will turn things against you. They love that, and they will just like try to rip your sentences apart.
All right. Thank you very much, Bastian, for this presentation.
Thank you.